just the goods, the cost of goods, or do you go through the resources and the actual costs that would get incorporated on a bill of material?
Okay, so what we do is it's a training program, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Use the
All right,
microphone.
so
Who's the mic?
You got a microphone? Good.
or scream loudly. So a bill of material, right, is all the, the bottle. Can you hear me?
No.
All right, so the bottle, the cap, the label, the spices that go in that, that's a bill of material. But then there's also other costs attached to it that, has to do with production, it has to do with overhead, it has to do with labor. My question to Everton was, is the bill of materials solely the parts, the components, or do you take into account those non-tangible items that we have to incorporate to cover our costs?
Okay. So what happens is that I mentioned bill of materials and I also mentioned bill of process, right? So what we do is that we account for every single item that's involved in a product. So I'll give you an example. I got involved with a company who, excellent product, great product. They got a military contract for the product, and everything is going very well, except that they don't understand why they were losing money. Things were going so well that they became sole source for that particular product in the military. And so I went through it, I looked at their information, and most stuff was done with an Excel spreadsheet, and they had the SBDC help them with this particular program. It took a while to find out what was going on, and basically, when the SBDC came in to help the person, it was so complicated, and they said, let's split things up a little bit. Let's move the overhead over here, and let's go through and step through the process. So every bolt had to be cataloged, where you got it, how much you pay for it. Every single thing went through, and the price and everything worked out very well, and there was a profitability portion associated with it. What happened is that the SBDC left, and their accounting folks forgot to bring the overhead back into the project. And so the reason they became sole source and won that bid is because they were selling that product to the military cheaper than it cost them to make it. And they didn't really realize that. So for us, we teach these companies to look at every particular item. So one example, I went to a company we're working with, and the guy was very, very clear and said, listen, we're making money hand over fist for this. The company that we're shipping this thing to, we're charging them twice what it costs us to make it. And I said, really? And we went through the stuff, and I said, so how do you get it to the company? It turns out that the company that was buying it from the manufacturer, I happen to know both of them. And I didn't like the fact that the guy who was buying it was so happy with your supplier, because if you're that happy with your supplier, there's got to be an issue there. And they're completely happy. Well, the reason they're so happy was they were getting it cheaper than they could get it anyplace else. Well, I said to the guy, well, so how do you get it over to Gardner? He said, well, we use a truck. We truck it over. I said, really? So who owns the truck? Hey, don't worry about it. That's owned by corporate. I said, so who's driving the truck over there? He said, don't worry about that. There's a corporate driver. By the time we got done, all of those things were not accounted for in the product. And so the price that he was selling his product for to the other person, it was so cheap. So we go through all of that. So the training program takes you through the nuts and bolts of that and try to get you educated in that regard. The other way it looks at too is that it takes you into the engineering aspect of it and said, okay, so why are you using this particular bolt? And you'll say, well, it's a bolt. Well, geez, is it going to be one that you pick up at Home Depot, or is it going to be one you get at Lowe's? And we really have to specify that because it makes a difference in the cost. I mean, you could get something from China that is infinitely cheaper than something that you could get probably from New Mexico. But the difference is either the lifetime of that material, the quality of that material, and all that's factored into your process. Because if that particular thing after you've built it, if it breaks in the field and you have to take it back, the cost of that is just astronomical. You really don't want to do that. So by identifying specifically what it is that you want in that bill of material, you know that your supplier is not going to use something else other than what you want. So you're protecting your process. And you go through the engineering steps in that regard. So it's everything, including the paper that you buy or the ink that you use to print in your office. And we include even the coffee, so
Oh, thank you.
everything.
No, that's great. No, that's fantastic. Yeah. How long does a study like that typically take? Like in a place like this?
Well, what it is,
Simple
what we would do is
manufacturing.
that we're taking the people who are starting, who have an idea, so you're already on your process. So what we would do is that it would be a subset. So if you have a new product that you're going to bring online, then we would work with you.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, and so the training classes, we're going to have 5 of them across the state. And you'd sign up, you'd come to the class, we'll go through all the theoretical stuff, but we'll have some hands-on folks working with you who are experts going through that. And then you'll have to do some of the work on your own when you get out.
How, is it like a 2-hour class, or is it like multiple?
All right, so the first level is 1 full day. And it takes a full day to go through this. And then we have a second level, which will be 2 days. Last year, we gave one at in Seaweed Building at MTRC. That was the first bill for scale. And we gave like small $5,000 to $10,000 grants to companies to help them along, to be able to overcome some of the hurdles. Matter of fact, one person had a direction and a design done, and while he was in the class, he changed his entire design because he realized the old one would not be successful, and went on to do something else, and we were able to get that person, a prototype.
So can I vote for one of those sessions to be in Long Island?
Well, so
Are you gonna vote?
we did one last year in Long Island. We are looking at distributing it through the state, but maybe we'll do another one here. I mean, I've got to tell you, I love working with MTRC, with Cynthia and Min, because they're really looking out for the manufacturers within their region, and so very, very cooperative. We were in Atlanta together in September, and within that short time, we were able to put together a conference which we had yesterday, and was able to get someone from NIST, the federal government, to come here to be our keynote speaker, not to mention a whole bunch of other speakers. So they're very, very flexible and cooperative. So we may be able to do that, but I can't promise that because there are other areas of the state looking for it. But
I'll work on it. I got him here today.
Okay, that's a good thing. He's got to get him off the island though, before traffic. So that's
Yeah.
it. Any other questions
Any-
before we start the presentations? All right, well, thank you very
oh,
much.
yeah.
So-
There's someone over there. Okay, it's www.fuzehub, FUZEHUB.com.
Sal's gonna start at 3
Okay.
Oh, yes, there's paperwork on the table. When you walk out, right to your left, grab every piece of material. There's stuff there for MTRC, Fuse Hub, CCE, ESD, Long Island Food Council. Pack it all up and it'll be on there.
Or you can email us and we'll get you the information. Most of it's on our website as well, so we have it up there so make it convenient. We try to continue to put this all in one place for everybody to get to, because you see there's a lot of opportunities in a lot of different sectors all over the state and the island for you guys to expand your manufacturing basis. So the more we get involved, the more you guys ask questions, the more we see that there is funding for what you'd like to do. So just keep asking and we'll keep trying to find the resources for it. So with that, thank you very much. And we're going to